Hello everyone and welcome to episode 19 of the Mind Body Soul Transformation Podcast. I'm so grateful to have you here with me for episode 19. I actually am so grateful to be at episode 19. This was an idea, an intuitive nudge that I followed back in June, and I'm so grateful for the reception I've had to this podcast, but also for what this has just offered me in sharing my journey and sharing what I'm coming across and what I'm learning. And I'm really hopeful that this has served you in that time too. I am planning on doing episode 19 and 20, then wrapping up season 1 of this podcast, and I will be back in 2025 after a little break with season 2. In season 2, I'm really excited because what is very clear to me is that season 2, I'm going to bring some others onto this podcast and do some interview type podcast with all of the wonderful people I've met this year that might be interested in joining me in this platform to share their wisdom, their knowledge, their journeys, their stories with you all, so that you don't just have to listen to my voice each week. I'm sure there'll be a bit of both as we move through, but I'm really, really excited to see what comes out of that. For today, though, the message is loud and clear. I've got chills constantly. We, this week, as this podcast drops, have just undergone 2 fairly significant astrological lunar events, both around big shifts and transformations. And the first of that was the full moon in Taurus, the supermoon, which happened on Friday in some parts of the country, Saturday for those of us in Australia. And then what is happening 2 days from when I record on the 19th. And so will have just happened when this podcast drops on, must be the 20th. The long anticipated, much awaited shift of Pluto from Capricorn into Aquarius. And everything that I have been reading and tapping into for more than 12 months now, I've been talking about this as the mark of this new age, as the dawn of the new era, as just has come through. And this has just been reinforced so strongly for me today in my Oracle card pool I've just shared on Instagram, the Tarot card pool that I am also sharing this afternoon. It's all about this new shift and this feeling of, or this need to hold on to the feeling of hope and optimism of what this could mean. Like, I am filled with excitement just talking about this shift and all of the possibilities that come along with this. And it feels strange to say that because I also know all of the other things that may play out in the collective around me, even in my individual circle and influence, and possibly surfacing within me. But it is holding on to that hope, holding on to that light, holding on to that vision that you hold for the future that is going to get us through this and allow us to make the most out of this opportunity, out of this shift, out of creating the lives, the world, the timeline that we want to exist on. Amazing, beautiful energy. So that's what I want to dive into today. So as I've already said, Pluto is moving from Capricorn, which has been in since 2008, into Aquarius on November 19th. Will have just happened when this podcast drops, and it's actually staying in Aquarius until 2044. So it's a long time. These are long cycles that I'm talking about. And so whilst I'm feeling this real big energy of shift and change and transformation, and we may see that individually and on the collective level just this week or in the next couple of weeks, really we're talking about change and transformation that happens over that 20-year period. And that means there's a huge opportunity for quite significant shift and change. And that's the excitement of it all. Like, so many chills. This is our opportunity. This is the time where we are going to really change some of the things in our lives, in our world, in our societies, in our communities that aren't serving us, particularly as it relates to the themes of Aquarian energy, which are around equity and fairness for everybody, rather than this hierarchical energy of Capricorn that we've been existing in, and also innovation and technology and how we can use that, and how new developments in that space, or maybe the revealing of developments that possibly have been around for a long time, can serve the greater good, can really change our lives, how we live, how we heal, and how we connect, not just with each other, but possibly with other parts of the universe. More on that to come. Oh, wow. My goodness, this energy is just wild. As you can see, I'm buzzing with excitement. So let's just start with some overarching themes of what this can look like on a societal and individual level. And then I just want to share a bit around what has been coming through for me, what's channeled through for me, what's come through in the oracle cards that I'm surrounded by right now as I've tuned into this energy today. As I've already said, the Capricorn energy that we're shifting from was very much around hierarchical power, hierarchies, and that kind of approach of systems and structures that maybe weren't for the good of all, that maybe were to generate wealth in corporations at the top, that maybe were to generate or control power, the narrative, us. Through fear is what wants to come through. And we're shifting away from that. And that seems a bit wild. It seems a bit unfathomable. It seems a bit impossible, because we've been existing in this world and this kind of paradigm. I've got a paradigm shift card right next to me. We've been sitting in this paradigm possibly for our whole lives. I would say for all of us tuning in to this podcast, in some ways for our whole lives, in how our society, our organizations in which we work, our governments, our medical systems, our education systems, you name it, anything that we exist within and need to interact with is set up in this way that doesn't necessarily serve us moving forward, but also doesn't necessarily serve the greater good in an equitable and fair way. And that is absolutely already being uncovered in the ways in which these systems and structures have been set up to serve the power of those at the top of this, or to serve a small portion of society, or the generation of wealth for some at the expense of others. That kind of approach, that how these systems and structures are set up is good for some, but it comes at the expense of others, or it isn't equal, it isn't fair, it's not serving a greater good for everybody. And we're shifting away from that. The Aquarius energy is much more around that greater good, that fairness and equality for everybody. And if we look back historically, we will also see the shift of Pluto into Aquarius often also coincides, but not by coincidence, of people calling their power back to themselves. And that can look like revolution. So how might we see that play out with all that is happening in the world right now? And I want to talk a little bit more about that this morning, because there's something that came through as I've been watching some videos this week of something happening in the world already. But let's start with that societal change around wanting equity and fairness for all, and shared power, and what that might look like. And the phrase that keeps coming to my mind is power to the people. We are big time calling back our power right now. And that's exactly what we need to do, for all of the reasons that I've kind of already touched on in this podcast in past episodes, but also just then of how much the structures in which we've been existing in haven't been serving us. Genuinely haven't been serving us in many, many, many ways, have been taking our power away and have been controlling us from often a place of fear, if I'm to be quite honest. And so it is time we are starting to call our power back in, and starting to recognize that these different aspects of these structures and systems, our governments, our education system, whatever it might be, haven't been serving us. The truth is being shared with us across a whole heap of things right now, and there's a lot more to come in that space that will help us recognize that this isn't what we want, and will help us have the courage and strength to call our power back to ourselves. And by doing that, that's what's going to enable us to then create the change, because we're no longer going to be looking outside of ourselves for the answers, for the ideas, for the solutions, for the action. We're going to recognize, actually, not only is that not what I want, but I hold the power to create the change that I want in my life, in my community, in my society, in my world. And we're going to build that together by taking our power back. And this is really going to be a shift from those old structures of greed and authoritarianism into something that we can be proud of, that is for the greater good of the collective and the highest good of all. And it's really like this community-driven approach. We're really shifting from this energy of what's best for me or I as an individual, and into what is best for us as a collective, as a group. And when I think of that, I'm not just thinking of humanity and the humans themselves, but I'm also thinking of our whole earth. How can we start to shift these systems and structures in a way that's no longer taking away from any living being, including our earth, and is a more sustainable approach for all of that? And how can we start giving back to all of those people, animals, our planet, that we have been taking from in the previous generations, including our current generations, including our current existence, to serve a small group of people? And for those of us listening to this podcast, that includes us. The very fact that I'm able to sit here and record this podcast, and you're able to have the technology to listen to this podcast, means that these systems and structures have been serving us, because there's plenty on this planet right now that do not have this privilege. And part of this shift, part of this coming together for the collective good of all, is for us to all recognize our own role that we've played in this, to do the healing that needs to happen there, and to acknowledge the shadow that's there, and stop pretending like it's them, it's the government, it's the organizations, it's the corporations, it's outside of ourselves. As I often say on this podcast, and many others say, as within, so without. This lives within us. And we cannot change this until we start to recognize how this shows up in our own life, both in terms of how we've received benefits from these structures and systems, because we have to acknowledge that for a couple of reasons, those reasons I was just talking about, but also as this shifts, that means we are letting go of something that has benefited us. And we need to recognize when that shows up for us and how we're trying to grasp onto something that is old, out of fear of lack and loss and losing something that we've been told is important, that has provided us whatever benefit, be it stability or security, how we've been controlled through that paradigm to want for that, but also to recognize how what might happen with that outside of us and within us is coming from a place of wanting to hold on to the old. And how can we show empathy and compassion and grace for those parts of ourselves and those parts of others, while still holding that light, holding that vision for where we're moving, and really being willing to let go, to trust that we are heading somewhere better than we are right now, and that whatever messaging comes through, be it just internally generated or be it generated by those structures and systems and individuals that are most trying to grip onto the old because they've benefited the most from these systems, any messaging that comes through from them that's trying to work through fear for us of, well, if you do this, if you let go of this, you might not have a house to live in, not have a job to work at, not have a whatever. All of these things that we've told we have to do to have the security, stability and privilege that we've got to have in this life. We need to be able to recognize that. Recognize it within us, recognize it outside of us, show it compassion, grace and empathy, and go and still hold that light, hold that vision of, and hold that faith that we will be looked after, that we are so divinely supported in this, that the where we are going will mean that we all have enough to do what we need to do. But that will now be for everybody, not just for us as privileged individuals within this world. And that doesn't mean hoarding resources, hoarding wealth. It doesn't mean taking resources or taking wealth from others or taking from the earth herself in unsustainable ways. It means that we're trusting in the natural flow of all these things, that the natural cycles of life will regenerate and recuperate and continue to provide for us if we can work within those cycles. That we don't need bank accounts with however much money saved, that we don't need multiple investment properties or whatever. Any example you can think of all of these things that we've been told we need to be what society tells us we need to be. We're leaving it behind. And I am excited about this, but I can also recognize that it is going to be scary. It's going to be hard for really all of us, but especially some of us, to let go, to trust, to have faith, and for some of us to actually just to be willing to share and to let go of some of that privilege that has only served us. I think what we're going to see in this space, and this is both from what I've been listening to and reading about, and I've got more books coming this week that's diving more specifically into this topic of what this shift might look like, but also what's coming through for me is a society that's built much more around community and more about how in our small communities we can help and support each other. Like, what do you have to offer your neighbours, your family, your friends within your local neighbourhood? How can you all support each other? I think we might be moving away from this idea of like big corporations and organisations that look the way they do right now, and more to this community focused approach. And again, this might not even happen within the next 20 years. This might be me looking 100 years out from now. But this is the beginning of a shift towards that, of a much more sustainable approach to things that's much more about your community that you exist in and what you have to offer and what they have to offer and how you all work together and support yourself in a really sustainable way. And I think that's beautiful. But it does... that idea in itself means letting go of some of the things possibly that we've become used to. Now, I'm talking a lot about letting go of what's come before and like this idea of this opportunity to wipe the slate clean and start again. And there is so much potential and opportunity within that, but I don't want to for one second say that we need to wipe the slate clean of everything. Well, what right now is an opportunity for us to do is to take stock of what has worked and what hasn't worked, what has served the greater good and what hasn't served the greater good, and take this part with us, build upon this part, and look for opportunities to reimagine these things. Like, if we now come at it through this Aquarian lens of the greater good for all, how can we reimagine these things to look? That's exciting. That's such opportunity to like create some really meaningful change. And even as I think about that and say that, the other thing there is it's meaningful change that's driven from the ground up. It's not this politician, this political party, this organization, this company, this business, this mastermind that's going to determine what this looks like. It is going to be you and I and your friends and your family to say, what about this? And it might be there's many different examples of what that could look like within your individual little communities. Finding something that works for your community that might be completely different to what works for my community. And then like this sharing of ideas and this developing of that into possibly something that works across the globe. That is a more unified approach where it needs to be to serve the greater good. The other big theme is around technological breakthroughs and innovation. Aquarian energy is all about innovation, and we've got, again, that Pluto of transformation here. So within the next 20 years, we can expect a lot of technological advancements, a lot of innovations coming through that really transform what technology has to offer us. And again, we're already seeing this. Like, the AI development in the last few years alone is a perfect example of this. But we've now got that Aquarian theme to this of how can we use this technology and this innovation for the greater good of all. So that might be medical therapies, it might be healing modalities, it might be a whole range of things. It might be science and technology around restoring our earth and sustainability and addressing all of the problems that we haven't been able to solve around that space moving forward. There's, again, so much potential here of significant shifts that change the way we live. I wanted to say we work, so I'm sure that's come through for a reason. And the way we address some of the problems that we currently face. The other thing that I feel drawn to say in this space is I think what is going to become apparent is that some of these technologies that we're about to be told about have been known for a long time. And as that truth is revealed, that's going to be deeply frustrating. I can feel that as I say that. And I am deeply frustrated that we might have been sitting on technology and innovation that could have saved people's lives, that could have stopped the pollution, that could have whatever. Any of these really big problems that we've been facing, that we've had answers to, that the great minds have had answers to and solved, that has been kept from us or not being used because it didn't serve the power structures that were at play. And that's just one of, I think, many truths that are going to come out to make us really recognize how much what we have been existing in has not been to serve the greater good. And that's a real shame, but it's just going to continue to ignite that fire within of, I am not giving you my power, I'm not giving you my energy, you do not control how I'm going to create this life and this earth and this world that I want to live in. Taking that power back. Each time one of these things comes out, we have to alchemize that anger, that rage, that frustration, that disbelief into sacred action, into calling our power back to ourselves to make the change, to create the world that we thought we might have existed in already in some ways. So, lots there, but I do think we're going to see big shifts in technology over the next 20 years, and that, I know that goes without saying, but the Aquarian energy is amplifying that, so it's likely we're going to see that really quickly, quite dramatic leaps in and advancements in that space. The other thing I feel drawn to say there, and I've probably lost all of the people that aren't from this podcast that aren't in the same world as we might exist in, so I'm just going to go here. The other thing we might find here is that some of these technological breakthroughs we may have had in past timelines, past lives, and may exist in other worlds, dimensions, planets, galactic communities. And as we awaken, and I want to talk more about that at an individual level shortly, but as we awaken these ancient knowledge and wisdom is coming online for us, that might help some of these advancements happen quite quickly, because none of this is new. It is our remembering of what is possible that is going to happen, and that's going to see these advancements take place, and just done in new ways with our current foundation of technology. I think AI is going to be a big part of this, but I think we're also going to see other stuff happen in this place, in this space. Space. That's where my mind was at. So there you go. And then the last big theme is this revolution over power structures. So again, calling power back to ourselves, power to the people. I think I already said this, but historically when Pluto has moved into Aquarius, it has associated or coincided with the American Revolution, the French Revolution, really major societal upheavals. And if you think about that right now, we are so primed and set for that. You can see how primed the world is for that kind of a shift to take place. I feel that's going to look different to previously, because I really feel the divine feminine is actually moving the shift. That's come through multiple times, including today. And by nature of it being feminine energy rather than masculine energy, I think it's going to be done in ways that are different to previously. That's not to say we won't have, there may not be some aspects of this piece that look like riots, like protests, like they have in the past, but I feel like there's going to be a different approach to this. When I say divine feminine energy, I mean that part of all of us, regardless of our external presenting, how we present ourselves to the world. But rather than it being about action with our divine masculine and like force this, rather than it being about forcing change, it's going to be about us rising, holding that vision, rising our vibration to create change around us, like to magnetize and manifest change around us that will make everything else fall away. That will take the power away from everything else because it's no longer in alignment, rather than insisting and forcing change. Because we're seeing right now that that isn't making a difference. That's interesting. That's all just come through for me now. Whilst we're on that, and before we go into like the individual aspects and the oracle cards that I've got pulled for today, around this and the ancient wisdom that I just spoke about with technology before, what came to me this morning whilst I was watching, I was scrolling on Instagram, and this week we've seen the senator in New Zealand do the haka in Parliament in response to a proposed bill that was going to affect the rights of the Maori people, or a treaty that was established with the Maori people. I don't have all the details on me right now. And when I first saw that video, I was so like, this is it. This is the shift. This is the Aquarian energy. And I still truly believe that. Like, it is the perfect example of this reconnection with ourselves and with calling our power back to ourselves, that this is going to be all about. And there's two other pieces of this I want to touch on. The other thing with that particular example, and this is a message that I've been seeing and receiving a lot lately, is to shift, to create the change that we need to create, to shift into this true version of greater good for all, including our planet and all living beings on it. We need to reconnect with the ancient and indigenous wisdom that is available to us, both with the people that live on our planet that have that to offer us, but also that wisdom that lives within us. Like, that is a big piece of this puzzle. And start to be, when we're looking at what we're recreating or what we're changing, that wisdom has to feed into this. And that was so resonant with that video out of New Zealand this week, that was like this connection with the people that haven't lost their connection to their past completely, with the people that are still connected with the truth, their history, their ancestors, the earth. That needs to form such a big piece of feeding into and directing the path that we're on. And the other thing I want to say about this, and this comes back to that piece I was talking about around our privilege and doing the healing and recognizing that within us, those of us that are not in those communities, possibly all of us, but I just want to speak for those of us that are not indigenous to the area in which we come from, we have work to do here in doing our own healing and doing our own, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm just going to keep it simple. Repair of the damage we have done as a collective, not just as individuals, but also as individuals and in our ancestral line to those populations. And then when we're calling our power back to ourselves as people that already have significant power and privilege, we need to share and offer that to those people and give them the platform they need to be able to feed into this. And I hope that lands in the way it is intended. I guess what I'm trying to say is we need to recognize our privilege and use our privilege to support that wisdom and those that hold that, feeding that into this new timeline. That's really clear to me, and that just feels like so resonant in my soul that has to happen, that has to be a big piece of this. And then lastly, the video I actually saw this morning was a responsive speaker. It might have been the following day possibly, to a member of parliament that was basically reading out a message that he had got from his communities, including the Maori people, about the impact of that speaker on the community. And it was honest and obviously wasn't something that the Speaker of the House wanted to hear. And his response was to demand it be withdrawn and something else. Maybe an apology, something to the effect of that. And the politician refused to, Member of Parliament refused to. Good on them, that's all I can say. And then he was asked to leave. And you know, even as I say this, I can think about how that could play out in all of our lives. As we move through this shift, as we start taking our power back and standing up for our power and standing up for what is right and what we believe in, that those who that threatens the most are really going to struggle with that. And the response we're going to see could be extreme at times. And that's going to look like this of like, trying to grip onto power, and in those moments where that happens, it's going to feel like they're going to maintain power, that they hold enough power right now to quieten and suppress the voices of anyone that's trying to stand up and rise up right now. But I guess what I'm trying to say here is we have to keep going, because that's not the reality. That is that last ditch attempt to try and hold power. And I encourage you all to continue to step into your power, to shine your light, to speak your truth, to speak the truth, to speak up for those that don't have a voice. As hard as it might be sometimes, as much courage and strength that may take at times, and as much as that may risk your sense of perceived security and stability and the perception of others of you, we all have a responsibility right now to do this work, to turn up and do all of those things that I've just said. Because ultimately it is our responsibility to call in this new timeline, to call in this new earth, to call in this shift and to call in this change that has to happen. That is going to happen. And we came here at this time. This is what we came here for. So that's a lot, and there's a bit more I want to say, and this is based off what's come through in the oracle cards around me, but also just what has channeled through as I lent into or meditated on today's podcast. I think what I want to start with is just reinforcing what I said at the start of this podcast. This is a big shift we're stepping into. This energy is going to feel big. This is going to feel a bit possibly unsettling, unnerving in how big this is, how big this can feel, particularly for those of you that are sensitive to energy around you. I got 2 cards that speak to portal energy. This card, portal, infinite mind, awakening consciousness. I want to speak to that part shortly. And this one, stepping through the portal. So I really do feel like we're stepping into this new timeline. And that's how big this is, that it feels like we're stepping through a portal. Now, when I meditated on this idea of the portal, 1111 came through. So we've just been through the 1111 portal that some people have spoken about. Many of us use that to call in this new timeline, to manifest this new timeline. But I'm really feeling like that was the point at which this energy became the timeline that we're on. And so we're already here, if that makes sense. Like, we're already on this. There's no turning back now. But that's how big this is. It's like we've quantum leaped onto a new timeline. I also got the Violet Flame card, which Violet Flame, I think I might have spoken about. I have recently. Actually, it was on my 1111 tarot pull, which is on YouTube. The Violet Flame is from Saint Germain. And it's all about burning away that which no longer serves. So beautifully speaks to this. But why I wanted to bring up this card specifically, because again, what happens on the collective level happens on the individual level as well. And so you are going to see shifts in your life in these areas. You are maybe going to see shifts in your community, in the people, your social connections as a result of this shift. And you may have a lot of your personal beliefs or truths challenged as we shift through this time period. And so I'm encouraging you to lean into that, to not resist that, but also possibly to go and look at some Violet Flame meditations, so many available on YouTube, to help you in that process, to help you release that which no longer serves you. Because that's going to help you move through this transition a lot more easily than still trying to hold on to that which no longer serves you. I mentioned with the portal card about this awakening consciousness. This shift, not necessarily just this shift in Aquarius, but I feel like it's all one and the same, is the phrasing that's just come to my mind, or part of it, already is bringing on 444 on my clock, bringing on a greater awakening, like another wave of awakening in people. The truths that come out will also feed into this. But what I'm finding, even for myself and in those that I'm speaking to right now, is for those of us that are already awake, there's new spiritual gifts coming online for us, or strengthening for us. And I'm certainly finding that with myself. That's been a huge, I've spoken about this on previous podcasts, the things that have come online for me just this year in tapping into this energy, leaning into this. But I share this now because when I was doing my oracle card pull, I saw nearly every card in this deck that spoke about some psychic ability or spiritual gifts of some description. And so it felt really important to share with you that you're not going crazy. Like, if you are starting to sense that you are tapping into something that you haven't tapped into before, lean into it, explore it more. It is like a muscle. The more you use it, the easier it gets. Speak to someone. Feel free to reach out to me, and if I can't help, I will point you in the direction of one of many people who can. But this can include opening up of your clairs, so your clairvoyance. You might be starting to have visions. Clairsentience, you might be starting to really feel physical changes in the environment or energy around you. Claircognizance, like really just that knowing of what's happening, of what's going to happen. Hearing things, having that psychic ability or that future vision come online for you. Telepathy is going to be a big thing in the future, and you might already be starting to pick up on that in some of your relationships with others, that that you're starting to kind of get a sense of what they're feeling and thinking without necessarily needing to talk to them or ask them, and possibly not even being in the same space as them. Healing gifts coming online, if you're feeling any tingling in your hands, possibly. Intuition is a big one that I've been speaking about every episode of this podcast. You might be feeling more and more of those intuitive nudges, and you're needing to really listen to that and tap into that. Light language is another one. Those of you that have listened to my podcast before or follow me on Instagram will know that that's something that's come online for me this year. And also channeling, like directly connecting with your ancestors, with your spirit guides, with any divine masters that might be wanting to connect with you. There's so much possibility here that's going to be normal in our future for all of us. Like, that's the thing I really want to say, that we all have access to these things, and that's been big for me to realize this year, because this is all new to me. Although I can look back at my childhood and recognize times where maybe I had access to some of these things and did not even for the faintest bit recognize it. But we all have access to these things. So as they're starting to come into our awareness, even just like hearing one of those things that I've just said, and if that resonated with you and your soul in any way, go do some reading, watch some videos, go learn more about it, and see if there's something there, and then start to recognize how that might be showing up for you within your own body and connection. And it may be that those things are part of your next part of this journey. In the tarot reading today that I've recorded, that I'll share Sunday, so it will be on Instagram for those of you that want to go have a look, it was really about holding that vision, holding that light, and moving with that, but letting go of the narrative that we have to show up in the world in a certain way, or we have to do particular things, tick particular boxes to be successful. This is changing. This is part of what's changing. What's being asked of us now is to follow that calling, follow that knowing of what you're meant to be doing, of what your soul wants to do here on this earth, and doing that. And it might be these gifts feed into it. It might be that it's something completely different. It might be making music, making art, making a podcast, writing a book. It could look like anything. But if your soul is wanting to do something, now is your time to start that, because that is part of your purpose that you're here on earth to serve in this new timeline, in this new earth, and it's how you are going to shine your light and let others have the confidence to do the same, and let go of their beliefs and burn away their beliefs, and let go of the systems and structures and fear that's holding them back, and shine their own light. And once we're all shining our lights, this is how we create this new existence of for the good of all, is that by us all doing what our soul wants to do, we're all able to contribute to the world in the way that we're meant to, and then we will all have everything that we need and more. And we're so supported in this right now. I've been saying that in a few of my videos without many details, but what I know for sure is that this shift, this timeline, this coming into the new earth is why we're here. It's why our soul chose to come to earth at this time. It is a responsibility, as I've already touched on. We have a responsibility to play our role in that, and following your soul's calling is part of that. But this shift is not just about humanity. It's not just about the earth. It's about the universe. Like, the shift that we are doing right now is calling us up to serve a greater good that is outside of this world. And there are beings and spirits and angels and whatever else you connect with that are supporting us in this. So, like, beyond belief, the amount of support we have around us right now. And that's not to say there's not also dark trying to fight this. There is. But they're not going to win. And so in those moments where it feels like they are winning, or it feels like their voice is the loudest, or it feels like their actions are something that we can't come back from. Know that that is not the case. Again, hold on to that hope, hold on to that light, and know that we are literally surrounded by light right now. And I was wondering where I was going to go next, but I guess this is it. This is from my Lemurian Oracle deck, Beyond Lemuria. I keep getting this card, so I know there's a message here for me specifically. Mount Shasta is in the States. It is thought to be the crown chakra, which also came out with it, of the planet. And our crown chakra is our connection to source, to all that is. When I talk about support, this is a place on earth where that is so known right now. In terms of the galactic support that is around us right now and the galactic connections that are available to us to support us even as individuals right now. I don't think there's anything more on Mount Shasta that I want to say right now. If that name rings a bell to you, or if that is of interest to you, go look into the spiritual significance of Mount Shasta, of the Lemurian people or the Lemurian beings that are associated with Mount Shasta, and the Telos city that's also believed to be underneath Mount Shasta. That might be of interest to you. But what I think I want to focus on here in terms of our support and assistance and connection to all that is our crown chakra. This is really important right now, and this is part of those spiritual gifts coming online, is our opening of our crown chakra to connect with our higher self, to connect with our guides, our ancestors, and any other beings that are wanting to support us at this point in time. And what I'm being called to share with you right now is this is part of the work that you need to be doing right now, is for those of you that aren't already, better understanding your chakra system and how to open those, working with that through whatever that might be for you, energy healing, Reiki. I'm available to support you in that should you need, but this is really important. And as I say that, that's not just to open your spiritual gifts right now, and it's not just to support you in your journey in terms of supporting you or having access to the support that is available to you from other beings right now, but it is to connect with your truth, with your higher self, so that you can stay in that knowing of what your truth is. That feels really important to say. And I think that's probably going to relate a little bit to those last-ditch efforts of the power structures that currently be trying to hold on to power through fear. That it will be really important to connect with yourself, with your intuition, with your higher self, possibly with your guides, to help you navigate that, where that might be starting to try and pull you out of alignment of the path that you are walking right now. And the last thing I want to touch on, and I've mentioned this a little bit already with masculine and feminine energy, is twofold. One, the duality card came out, and you can see in this card we've got the skull on her lap, and I didn't know why this card was coming through. I meditated on it and then worked it out. To me, this card has come out because this shift, this change that we're stepping into, part of that is letting go of the duality and recognizing that we are all one, we are all the same, we all come from the same source, and that we need to come into unity, both in terms of our masculine and feminine energies, but also in terms of letting go of the ideas of race, of appearance, of ability, of whatever separating us. Anything that's separating us, we need to let go of as we move into this shift, which is probably self-explanatory with all we've been speaking about. But that includes this idea of good versus bad and right versus wrong is the most important message here. And this is one I know I've spoken about before that I really grapple with. But again, it's just coming back to that Hermetic principle of as within, so without. And so if you're seeing something that you perceive to be bad or dark outside of yourself, what is that mirroring within you? And how can you look at that and heal that if it needs to be healed, but possibly also just accepting that we are all one, accepting that everyone is moving from a place that they believe is the right way to go about things. And this is so hard in some really extreme examples to accept and appreciate and recognize any semblance of that within yourself, because there's so much judgment there. So I think it's actually letting go of that judgment and just accepting what is, and then moving in the world how you want to move. That feminine energy again of not forcing your opinion, not forcing people to change, but turning up in the world as you are and magnetizing in that change around you by shining your light and by calling people up. And I think, as I said that, and this came through in that Reiki and light language healing that I released last week, that includes calling the masculine up. As the feminine energy leads this, and the masculine energy that really has benefited most from what we're moving out of, not divine masculine, just the patriarchy in particular, the shadow side of the masculine energy is what I needed to say there. We are calling the masculine to rise. We're not forcing them, we're not judging them, and by them I just mean that part of the energy, again, within ourselves and in whatever way that presents in the world. We're calling them to rise. And that's not our job. It is not our job to make that happen. It is their job to step up. And when they do, we will support them in whatever needs to happen there, whatever healing needs to happen, whatever needs to be released, but they have to step up first and be willing to let go of the ways of the past that have not served the greater good of all. There's a lot about this that is about balance and about unity between our masculine and feminine energies, and being much more accepting, and not even just accepting, but willing to embrace our feminine aspects of ourselves, and that being recognized on a global scale as a really important part of that balance, of that sustainability, of that calling in this new timeline, of that calling in this new way of being. And that likely will also be then echoed out in our relationships, in how our organizations work, and bringing the feminine aspects more into balance in those ways, and allowing them to play the important role that energy has to play, whilst also supporting that divine masculine energy to play its role, which is very important in terms of like action and support and like that foundation for the beautiful feminine free-flowing energy. There's a lot of healing to be done on both sides between now and then. I think the feminine has done a lot more of that than the masculine, just as a general rule. But that's we're being asked to look at and to work on within ourselves, because that's going to be a big piece of the puzzle as well. All right, this has been a lot longer than I was expecting and planning. So I'm going to wrap that up there. I hope this serves. I hope this helped you better understand what this shift is all about, what that could mean for you, to start to think about what that could look like for you, so you can start creating that vision and really holding on to that and moving towards that. And maybe just a reminder to come back to this episode if you need to, as things get a bit rough, as things start to crumble and change around you, to come back to this message and this idea to help you hold on to that light, hold on to that vision, and have faith and trust that where we are going is somewhere beautiful. And let's do this. Thank you, everyone. Wishing you the most beautiful week, but also the most beautiful age of Aquarius. Again, won't be without its challenges, but so much opportunity to really make big changes in the world. Bye, everyone. See you hopefully next week for the last episode of the season, episode 20. And then, as I said, we'll be back in 2025 with season 2 with some guests on the podcast, which is so exciting. All right, loads of love and light from my heart into yours. Thank you. Bye.